I get the shakes, I hyperventilate.
As I saw it, I was shaking, crying, and it was amazing.
Language really is put to the test when you're trying to describe it.
It's made me obsessive.
Once you get this bug, you're likely to pursue it.
I'll do a small one because I need my focus screen here, okay?
To actually see.
And it's just fantastic.
Eclipse Chasers are, I have to be some of the most interesting people that I've ever met. They come from all walks of life, and they all have one common goal. They want to stand in the moon's shadow.
Keep it up.
Imagine if all the natural wonders in the world, like the Grand Canyon and the Great Barrier Reef and Niagara Falls, all rolled into one, only appeared for 2 minutes at a time somewhere in the world every few years. People would make the effort to be in the right time at the right place. And this is a natural wonder beyond all natural wonders. It's not just an earthly wonder, this is a solar system natural wonder.
I consider myself very lucky because the first eclipse that I ever saw was in the Baja, Mexico in 1991. And the total phase of the eclipse, where you can see the corona, the atmosphere of the sun, lasted almost 7 minutes, which is a huge amount of time for a total solar eclipse. And after that, it affected me so deeply, I couldn't forget it. I couldn't get the image of the solar corona out of my mind. And I wanted to replay it as many times as possible, which is why I've seen eclipse after eclipse after eclipse in the four corners of the world ever since that day.
The eclipse of the sun is, really my reason of, wanting to be on the earth and do things. It's just so spectacular for me. The first total eclipse I saw in 1979 is vivid in my mind. My wife and I had tears in our eyes. I have never forgotten that. I dream about it. It is my life, really, to go to a total eclipse of the sun.
Eclipse chasers are certainly adamant about their chosen hobby. They all share the same love of the chase and the love of what they see in the sky. Once they go to one, they're bitten. And they're making plans to go to the next one.
We're in Aruba now. It's Feb 26, 1998, and I've only been out of bed about 45 minutes.
Live on Aruba were waiting for this eclipse for years. They knew about it well in advance, and they were really excited this was all happening. I mean, the place was just teeming with eclipse activity and anticipation about the eclipse.
Did you make all those yourself?
Yes.
Yes?
Candy Bouquet Aruba. It's from Candy Bouquet Aruba.
They even had a special eclipse beer. A beer made just for the day for eclipse chasers.
How's it taste though?
It tastes like an eclipse.
Totally delicious.
And the best thing about Eclipse Day is meeting all the other eclipse chasers. People that you've never seen before, people that you met from last time, all spread out along the beach, setting up their telescopes and their camera equipment and putting up all their tripods. And it's just like a carnival in the hours before an eclipse, watching everybody getting themselves ready.
It is my first eclipse. Yeah, welcome to the club. All right. It's my first total. I've seen annuline too. It does give a real wide field of view. It has a short focal ratio. Yeah. And it takes these 2-inch diameter eyepieces.
So you made this thing?
Yes. A friend of mine helped me cut out the wood. That's my $27 tripod. Also recovery sales outlet.
Where are you guys from in Canada?
Vancouver, Canada.
Vancouver?
Yes, I came all the way here. Special to see. I want to see the solar eclipse. I mean, one solar eclipse was
91 in July in Mexico.
Oh, yeah.
And I saw it first time. It was so neat, and I'd like to see it again. The clip get me to see other countries also I've never been before.
It's going about 2,000 miles per hour, so we go 400 miles per hour. For us who are eclipse chasers, it's very hard to often relate to non-eclipse chasing people why we do this. You know, it's going to get dark for a couple of minutes. It gets dark every night. Well, what's the big deal? They don't realize that for those few minutes, the few minutes leading up to totality and during totality and then afterwards, you experience every emotion known to mankind. You know, excitement, anxiety, worry, fear, that primitive fear of the sun disappearing, you can sense that. But just the apprehension, are you going to see it? Is a cloud going to come along? Is my equipment going to work? Am I in the right spot? It's an emotional experience. It's emotionally draining, and yet we keep coming back for that excitement.
Keep it up! Oh my God! Keep it up! Eye protection. Yeah.
Eclipses definitely exert an emotional power over you. Maybe it's the sense of the fact that you're living in a solar system. You're suddenly being made aware not just of your earthly environment, but that larger extended environment that stretches out into space, that includes the moon and the sun, the other planets as well. You just start thinking bigger. It's a very overpowering feeling, especially when it's your first eclipse.
I'm so glad that we came.
I've got to travel to the four corners of the Earth to see solar eclipses. And today I find myself in Istanbul, in Turkey, en route to the southeastern part of the country to stand in the shadow of the moon in a couple of days.
Eclipse chasers, really avid eclipse chasers, it really does become a milestone in their lives. Their lives are planned around it to a certain extent because you have to. You're looking at a 2 or 3 week trip, perhaps, depending on where it is around the world, a major expedition to get to an eclipse, total eclipse. And here we are in Turkey looking at all these incredible sites of civilizations that have swept back and forth across this land for thousands of years, and the history here. And what a wonderful place to see an eclipse like that.
This was a significant event, and so they interpreted that as being the sign from the heavens, of course. That
I'd never been to the Middle East before, so when I heard there was a solar eclipse coming through, this was my opportunity. I joined a group of 70 or 80 other Canadian astronomers and eclipse chasers, and we spent 2 weeks traveling through the desert in Turkey chasing the moon. As an eclipse chaser, I've been lucky enough to be greeted warmly by people around the world in all the countries that I've been to see eclipses. In Mexico, in South America, in India. We're greeted very warmly because we have completely non-confrontational, non-political objectives. We're here to chase the sun and the moon. And people tend to respond to that. They respect that. And that's certainly the case here in Turkey.
Hello, Canada. Nando.
Seeing the culture in various places is a wonderful thing that I might never have done, not being particularly a person who loves traveling. I don't, but I love to be there. So the ardor of travel for me builds up to the magic of the eclipse.
When I was in India, I was with people who I think were up toward their 20th eclipse. On this trip, I think the most any person that I know of has been on, I believe, is 11. It's such an awe-inspiring experience for someone who truly loves nature and loves the fireworks of nature.
difference in my life for an Eclipse Chaser is that your holidays are not in July or August like all the other people, or in December. You have to follow the moon and the sun. So that's my holidays schedule, is the eclipse schedule. So many miles by aircraft, take 5 to 7 aircraft to see a sun disappear. Yeah, somewhere we are crazy. But when you like something, you'll do it with your heart.
We've planned our entire life according to solar eclipses. We know what countries we're going to be in for years in advance, and in fact, we are in those countries. I mean, in the Philippines in 1988, I knew that 11 years later I would either be in Europe or the Middle East, and here I am in the Middle East.
It's the big day. It's clear. What every Eclipse Chaser wants to see.
How you feeling about it?
Very great.
Yeah.
I'm excited.
Actually, using Mylar is not a good way. It's better if you use welder's glass, but it's preferable if you have a solar filter. Yeah, there are some sunspots. Good, good.
On Eclipse Day, we drove from the central part of Turkey 4 hours down into the southeastern part to this archaeological site.
Enjoying the eclipse?
With every mile, as we got closer and closer and closer, I just had this excitement welling up inside of me. It had been building already for weeks and months and years behind me, and now we were almost there. It really was like driving back into prehistory.
The place we were at, Hassan Cave, it was absolutely amazing. Storybook setting of an eclipse. I felt like I was back in, medieval times, or even before that, where the eclipse is something that's like a sign of the gods, all stone caves and, just beautiful landscape, little mini Grand Canyons everywhere.
Hiking up with all of our gear up these stone steps to the very top where we have a walk to our observing site. We're now about 2 hours from the total eclipse, and I hope I don't run out of water. It's hot. How you feeling?
Excellent.
2 minutes! Say it again.
2 minutes for the first contact!
So he just yelled out, we've got less than 2 minutes to the first contact, where the moon starts to encroach on the disk of the sun and take a bite out of it and start to move across. I can't wait for that. I got my welder's glass ready to go. And I've even got spares for some of the locals.
1 minute!
1 minute.
The energy on Eclipse Day is apprehension, fear, a lot of excitement, a lot of, it's like Christmas morning.
Actually, most of my energy is probably gone in the days before, in the anticipation. Usually by about an hour before the eclipse, I'm pretty much of a basket case, actually.
Sometimes it's difficult to put a lens in the right place or to move the tripod, and one really has to be very sure about what they're doing so that the jitters doesn't make them get fumbleitis or drop things right at the critical moments.
Well, we've got first contact well underway, and there's a nice, big, fat bite out of the solar disk at about 3 o'clock. It looks just tremendous. I love it when it started. Can't wait for the big moment. During an eclipse of the sun, the moon is traveling in its orbit and moving directly in front of the sun and casting a shadow right down onto the surface of the Earth. And from space, you can see this gigantic black blotch moving across the globe. And when you're standing on the surface of the Earth yourself, it's an even more incredible sight to see it coming for you, because it's like this big, gigantic black monster that's creeping across the Earth coming for you to envelop you in the thing. It's amazing.
Will talk about the excitement of seeing the shadow of the moon approaching, and the sense of being very small in a very large universe, and sort of seeing the heavens move and somehow being a part of that.
It gets darker and darker, and the excitement builds, and it feels like a thunderstorm is coming as the shadow approaches.
There it is! There's the Simon ring!
And then, boom, the shadow's on you.
Excitement, elation, of course, and just sheer ecstasy, joy. This thing is just so wonderful.
It's fear, it's awe, it's everything rolled into one. It's a jumble of emotions. It's something that I only get to experience during total solar eclipses.
Oh, the corona is amazing.
Many of us experience Eclipse Chasers, seen many eclipses, come mainly to see the corona. That is the beautiful thing to see, that beautiful, delicate, feathery, and glowing type of shape that no photograph, no video, no painting, nothing that I've seen could possibly show. It's an unearthly type of sight, something that most people never see in a lifetime.
Look at that, man.
And to see this a huge ball of the sun that is so far away and the large ball of the moon line up with the Earth, you know, 3 bodies in a row, and then me in between it, it just shows me the clockwork of the universe.
Look at Venus there. Look at the sunset.
The sun is such a provider of everything for us, and to see the blackness when it's entirely gone, and then to have that one bright shining moment when it just comes back with such clarity.
Here comes this corona. There it is. There's the
And to feel its warmth suddenly just suffuse the earth. And it's a great resurrection metaphor. I mean, we're back to earth, we're back to life.
That's it! We did it! Eclipse 99 in Turkey!
The place where I watched Eclipse, they were all crying. Well, frankly, I was about to cry.
I've seen 5 total solar eclipses, going for my 6th, and it still brings me to tears. To be moved to tears by the glory of nature, I mean, it's a tremendous experience.
Some of the people go to see eclipses, but at the same time, they're interested in seeing the world. So the eclipses are their ticket to see the world. So in a sense, they've become world citizens, and then the eclipse kind of makes them solar system citizens, so they sort of get this ever-expanding view. And then there are the people like me, who every time they experience an eclipse, they feel, I'm not quite sure if I did this quite right. You know, like you do one thing and you concentrate on one thing, and then you kind of wish, oh, I wish I'd spent more time looking for this, or I wish I'd spent more time looking for this. And in some sense, they're looking not just for the perfect picture, but just for that sort of perfect enveloping experience of the moment.
It's given me a sense that, that there is an aesthetic part of life, and a need to experience beauty, which I have to think of as being something which is important for me.
Well, I think it's given me a broader picture of the world as a whole, a little less provincial, perhaps a fuller person, better understanding, a little more patience, perhaps.
Just want to see the next one, you know. All I want to do is see the next eclipse, and I've become obsessed by it. But I also meet over and over again great friends that I haven't seen for years, and when the Earth, Moon, and Sun, and we align, we meet each other again, you know, 2 years later, 5 years later, or 9 years later, you know, the same people over and over again in different combinations and permutations. It's made my life richer for that.
Well, the credit card companies love me. Generally, I'm prepared emotionally and with my equipment, but not financially. So it keeps me in this 18-month revolving circle of debt. When I think of how much money I spend per second of totality, I still think it's a good deal, but it's really difficult to convince people who haven't seen one that you're doing something which has value.
I think I'll end up being a chaser if I become like a billionaire, but you know, I'd rather get the Acura Integra that's like a few years old than you know, go see the 3 minutes or so.
Stop doing chasing Eclipse? I don't think. It's so amazing to see that show, even if it stays only a few seconds.
When I picked them up from the airport as a guide, I thought that those people might be very crazy. It's the most beautiful, most fascinating, most fabulous thing I have ever seen in my life. And I'm definitely going to Zambia next year.
I think the eclipse is a metaphor for life. The way you handle that moment of totality also gives you a message as to how to handle life, because life is so fleeting as well and so brief, and you want to try and enjoy those moments that really matter, and you want to be with the people that really matter. You want to be in you want to be in places that mean something to you. So this eclipse was a good example of that. It was a very special place, and it was a very special group of people. So that's how you want to live your life.
Here it comes, this is Ivan Ring.